They were supposed to be untouchable, humanity's brightest minds, protected by every defense Earth could muster. Yet, in a single, ruthless act of alien aggression, 12 of our best were gone. It wasn't just an attack, it was a message, a declaration that humanity was beneath them. They thought we'd crumble. They thought we'd surrender. What they didn't know was that humanity's true strength had always been born from loss. The Quaraks didn't arrive with a blaring announcement or a parade of their superiority. No, they came silently, shrouded in the cold embrace of void-like ships that made humanity's space vessels look like rusted tin cans. Their sleek, black hulls pierced through the atmosphere like sharks gliding through water. In their wake, they left only devastation and a stench of inevitability. The world trembled under their shadow, and humanity, for once, wasn't the apex predator. They didn't seek surrender. They didn't beg for mercy. They simply claimed what they believed was theirs, our planet, our resources, our very existence. And they did it with the precision of a surgeon removing a cancer. The reports came in fast. Satellites, military outposts, scientific stations, one by one, they went dark. But it wasn't the loss of equipment or systems that cut the deepest. It was the 12 human lives snuffed out without warning. Scientists, engineers, diplomats, experts, all vanished in an instant. Their deaths a quiet, brutal reminder of our fragility. 12. Just 12. It should have been a statistic, something to brush off. Instead, it became a rallying cry, a flicker of fire that ignited something dormant in humanity. After all, how could it not? 12 was too few, too calculated. It was personal. "We lost 12, the generals repeated, their faces hardened with guilt and rage. 12 brilliant minds who could have found a peaceful solution, who could have warned us, who might have stopped this madness before it ever began. But the Quaraks weren't interested in solutions. They were interested in dominance. The war didn't start with a bang, as most conflicts did. It started with a whisper, a single chilling transmission from deep space, a threat, a reminder, a declaration. Humanity was weak, insignificant, and unworthy. The Quaraks had arrived to claim their prize, and they would do so with merciless efficiency. But humanity wasn't ready to roll over. We weren't known for our patience or our capacity to endure, but we were known for one thing: stubbornness. 12 lives taken became 12 faces burned into our minds. Faces of the lost, faces of the forgotten, faces of the vengeance that would come. Some called it desperation. Some called it madness. But the human spirit had a peculiar way of rising from ashes, a curious resilience that even the Quaraks could not fathom. They thought we'd crumble beneath their superior firepower, bow before their might. They thought wrong, because sometimes it takes loss to remind us of what we are capable of. Sometimes it's the smallest numbers that ignite the biggest fires, and when we burn brighter than they ever anticipated. 12 was just the beginning. After the Quaraks took those 12 lives, we were left to pick up the pieces. The world was plunged into chaos. Governments fractured, alliances crumbled, and people started questioning everything, except whether we were doomed. That wasn't really up for debate. What came next was what humans did best when the odds were stacked against us: panic. The media exploded with wild theories, conspiracy rants, and enough speculation to fill 1,000 alternate histories. But no one had answers, only more questions. How could they be stopped? Why were they here? And most importantly, who exactly were these Quaraks, other than that terrifying space jellyfish species who wore their ships like ponchos. Our first contact with them wasn't exactly a diplomatic breakthrough. No, it was more like a cosmic game of hide-and-seek, where they were the predator and we were the terrified prey. The Quaraks didn't bother with subtlety. They moved like shadows, stealthy, lethal, and always just one step ahead. Every attempt to strike back felt like throwing rocks at a tank. Every single attempt. We fought back, of course, because when have humans ever accepted defeat gracefully? They knocked down our defenses with a precision that was both chilling and frustrating. Every missile launched was intercepted, every fleet decimated before it could cross the threshold of their ships. It wasn't just their firepower, it was their cunning. They didn't just attack, they predicted. They didn't just destroy, they ensured we couldn't rebuild. And yet, despite the devastation, humanity held on to hope. Because, let's face it, even when we're up against insurmountable odds, we're stubborn as hell. It wasn't exactly pride that kept us going, but a sick mix of desperation and indignation. How could they just waltz in and take what they wanted? How could they erase 12 lives and not face some form of consequence? The humans started doing what we do best when faced with the impossible. Come up with wildly impractical, borderline insane solutions. First, we built weapons so massive they'd look like oversized toys if they weren't designed to destroy entire planets. Then, we poured every resource into projects so absurd they might as well have been space-age fairy tales. A weapon capable of punching holes through their ships? A shield that could bend time itself? Yeah, we tried it. None of it worked. The Quaraks weren't fazed by our desperation, and they weren't impressed by our firepower. In fact, they seemed to be more entertained by our futile efforts, like watching a bunch of ants struggle to lift a pebble. Each failed mission only reinforced one thing. They were untouchable, indestructible, immune to our best-laid plans and desperate prayers. That realization hit harder than any laser blast. The Quaraks didn't just outgun us, they outthought us. And for every setback, we grew more paranoid. What if they weren't just here for conquest? What if they weren't interested in taking over Earth? What if they were here to wipe us out? Entirely? That thought kept me up more nights than I care to admit. How could a species that killed 12 of us without a second thought think twice about millions? Apparently, not at all. In the wake of their cold, ruthless slaughter, we found ourselves trapped in a terrifying cycle of uncertainty. The Quaraks weren't just fighting us. They were making a statement. A reminder that humanity was nothing more than an afterthought in the grand tapestry of the universe. 12 deaths had proven it. They weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to reason. They were here to dominate. Our efforts to strike back became increasingly desperate. We launched fleets, sent probes, and flooded space with transmissions, begging for any sign of weakness. Silence greeted us. The Quaraks didn't respond to pleas, and they didn't care about our fear. They viewed us not as a challenge, but as a minor annoyance. Like an itch they couldn't quite reach, but couldn't ignore either. Meanwhile, we humans spiraled further into paranoia. Every quiet moment, every shadow lurking in the void, became a threat. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. Conspiracy theories about their true intentions, wild speculation about their origin, and most of all, fear. Endless, suffocating fear. We became obsessed with what we didn't know. And as our world crumbled, the Quaraks just continued their campaign of calculated indifference. They didn't care if we knew why they were here or where they came from. They didn't care if we begged for answers. They just kept coming. striking and disappearing before we could even figure out how to fight back. It wasn't a war. It was a slaughterhouse where we were the livestock. Maybe they're after resources, some genius suggested. Our planet's rich in minerals. They need our stuff. Or maybe they just don't like us, chimed in another. We're like that one relative who shows up at the wrong party. Maybe they're just bored, a third quipped. What else do aliens do on weekends? Plunder planets, obviously. None of these theories got us closer to survival. In fact, they only made the situation worse. With each failed attempt to engage them, our grip on reality slipped. We weren't fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting to prove we could still hold on to the remnants of our sanity. The Quaraks weren't invincible. At least, we hoped they weren't. But what made them truly terrifying wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their indifference, their absolute disregard for our existence. They didn't want peace. They didn't want negotiations. They simply wanted to wipe us off the map, like a smudge on a windshield they hadn't noticed until now. And the worst part? We had no idea how to stop them. No plan, no strategy, no miracle weapon or secret weaponized technology that could tip the scales in our favor. Every military victory was Pyrrhic at best. We were left with the knowledge that we were no longer in control, if we ever had been. As the days bled into nights and the nights into more days, the Quaraks became more than an enemy. They became the shadow we couldn't escape, the specter haunting every decision, every whisper, every breath we took. The thought of them, their silence, their dominance, began to creep into every mind like a parasite. 12 humans dead. Millions more on the line. And all we could do was wait. Hope wasn't dead, but it was starting to feel like a distant memory. By the time we realized the Quaraks weren't interested in subtlety, it was already too late. They didn't need negotiations, treaties, or even terms of surrender. No, they didn't care about any of that. All they cared about was domination, and we were their unwilling puppets, dancing on the strings of their destruction. We tried everything. Seriously, everything. From tactical strikes to desperate calls for peace. We built bigger fleets, developed experimental weapons, and even tried diplomacy, because, apparently, we were gluttons for punishment. There wasn't a plan humanity hadn't already attempted. The only thing we hadn't tried? Giving up. And believe me, some of us were close. The few scientists who survived the first Quaraks attack became prophets of a sort. They scoured ancient texts, searched the stars for any hint of a weakness. They compared the Quaraks to every species humanity had ever encountered. After all, there had to be some precedent, right? Some Achilles' heel? Some glaring soft spot that we could exploit. Instead, they found nothing. Zip. Nada. The Quaraks were a species forged in darkness, literally. Their ships glowed with an eerie bioluminescent light, but their biology was a mystery. No one knew where they came from, what they ate, or how they thrived on the edge of space. They didn't seem to care about oxygen or survival in the ways we did. They didn't even seem to sleep. Maybe they're not like us at all, one researcher suggested, his voice trembling with exhaustion. What if they're not biological? What if they're machines? The room went silent. Everyone exchanged glances, as if silently agreeing to ignore the possibility. Because if the Quaraks weren't even organic life forms, what were we supposed to do? Squash them with our optimism? Hope they'd blink and realize, oops, we messed with the wrong species? Hope was a hard thing to cling to when the Quaraks didn't just keep winning. They reveled in it. They weren't calculating or cold-blooded. They were pure predators. It wasn't about victory for them. It was about destruction. The kind that wiped entire colonies off the map, leaving nothing but lifeless craters in their wake. We had thousands of humans on board a fleet meant to retake our home. Dozens of star systems were abandoned, their lights snuffed out like candles. Entire colonies were wiped clean in a matter of hours. The Korax weren't just killing, they were erasing. The lucky ones died swiftly. The unlucky ones were absorbed into the void, their existence forgotten. And still, we couldn't wrap our heads around what drove them. We kept waiting for them to get bored or exhausted, like some cosmic enemy on a video game level that eventually runs out of lives. But they didn't. They were relentless. One of the crazy theories, because, let's be honest, at this point, all theories were crazy, was that they didn't see us as intelligent life. They didn't recognize us as sentient beings. We were ants to them, scurrying around, making noise. Maybe that's why they didn't bother with negotiations. Maybe that's why they killed 12 and ignored the rest. 12 dead humans. Millions of them still alive. And the Korax didn't flinch. We didn't have a strategy. We didn't have a solution. All we had was a stubborn refusal to accept the possibility that we were already defeated. Even when they were wiping us off the map, we clung to the hope that we could find some way to hit back. We had no choice. Giving up wasn't really an option anymore. It was survival or extinction. And in our case, survival meant figuring out what made the Korax tick, or dying trying. At some point, desperation began to breed creativity, or, more accurately, desperation began to breed insanity. We weren't just launching half-baked plans anymore. We were reaching for anything that might give us an edge. The more traditional methods had failed, so humanity's brightest minds turned to what could only be described as the truly bizarre. There was a brief, almost laughable moment when someone suggested we try psychological warfare. Yes, psychological warfare. Because clearly, the Korax, those interstellar juggernauts, were going to be stopped by someone showing up at their doorstep with a sad face and a PowerPoint presentation titled, "Why You Shouldn't Kill Us." "We'll send them love letters," someone proposed, rubbing their eyes like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. "We'll show them we're not so bad. Maybe offer them cookies. Who doesn't like cookies?" Surprisingly, the idea didn't get shot down immediately. Some higher-ups took it seriously. It was that kind of environment now, where even the most ridiculous plans were treated like they might hold the key to salvation. But of course, nothing worked. The Korax didn't have a good cop, bad cop preference. They didn't respond to emotional appeals or threats or bribes. They just ignored everything and kept coming. The cookies? Left floating in space, untouched. The love letters? Read and discarded like a bad joke. Meanwhile, the scientists were having their little crises. What if they were trying to communicate? Maybe they were sending us signals, but we just couldn't decode them because, well, they were alien signals. And not just any signals, but ones that were probably so far beyond our comprehension, they might as well have been transmitted in Morse code by Martian bats. "We'll build a machine that deciphers alien languages," they cried, as if any machine could magically understand something that was likely encoded in frequencies no human mind could fathom. The machine sputtered to life and, surprise, spat out nothing but static. Because, of course, aliens wouldn't be using languages we could understand. They'd probably be communicating in quantum vibrations or some nonsense we hadn't even invented yet. Our fleets were getting obliterated, our colonies annihilated, and all we could do was scratch our heads and argue over who had the dumbest plan. Build a giant shield to block their attacks? Tried it. Launch faster-than-light missiles to outrun them? Done. The Korax didn't seem to care. Nothing slowed them down, nothing stopped them. They moved through our solar system like it was their playground, and we were just the unwelcome guests. But then came the moment that everyone would remember, whether they wanted to or not. Someone had the bright idea to make friends with the Korax. No, I'm not kidding. They proposed we find a Korax leader, offer to be their allies, and strike some sort of bargain. Because, obviously, why would they want to kill millions of humans when they could just have us on their team instead? We'll offer them joint control of Earth, someone suggested, eyes gleaming with delusion. They get what they want. We get what we want. It's a win-win. Somehow this plan gained traction. Maybe because by that point we were all so tired of losing, we clung to any ridiculous hope, like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. Of course, the Korax didn't exactly see it that way. They didn't show up to negotiate. They showed up to annihilate. They didn't see us as allies or anything remotely useful. They saw us as obstacles to be removed from existence. When the Korax finally did arrive, it wasn't with words or promises. It was with destruction. And that's when we realized, once and for all, humanity's only shot wasn't negotiation, wasn't diplomacy, and definitely wasn't cookies. It was survival. Plain and simple. As the Korax pushed further into our solar system, we reached a point of no return. There was no escape, no hope of reinforcements from distant stars. The Earth was on its own, hanging by a thread, and we knew it. The silence from the Korax wasn't just ominous. It was deafening. They didn't gloat. They didn't broadcast their intentions. They just came, and they took. And all we could do was watch in horror. By now, humanity had exhausted every possible avenue. We had tried brute force, peace treaties, psychotic ideas like Team Korax, and even praying to whatever higher powers might still be listening. Nothing worked. The Korax were beyond reason, beyond reach. They weren't just killing us. They were erasing us. The Earth's population dwindled, the stars grew darker, and all that remained was fear. But even in the face of annihilation, humans have this strange ability to grasp at straws. It wasn't just hope. It was desperation. The kind of desperation that makes you try things you know are doomed. And somehow, in this chaos, someone came up with the most insane idea of all. The last resort. The plan that probably shouldn't have even been considered, let alone acted upon. They called it Project Rebirth. The idea was simple, or at least it sounded that way at the time. What if humanity evolved? What if we could unlock some hidden potential, some untapped gene that had been lying dormant all along? The Korax were using advanced technology, wielding powers far beyond anything we understood. So what if we could do the same? Not just with weapons, but with ourselves. Evolution, they said. A species that adapts to survive. The theory went like this. A combination of alien DNA, ancient human mutations, and some wild science fiction mumbo-jumbo would transform us into something stronger, faster, smarter. Something that wasn't just human anymore, but something better. Something capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Korax. Because, of course, what could possibly go wrong? The first batch of experiments began. They injected humans with who knows what. Alien chemicals, modified genes, and whatever else they could scrounge from the darkest corners of science. The side effects were immediate. Skin that shimmered like liquid metal, eyes that glowed with faint bioluminescence, bodies that moved faster, stronger. Some called them monsters. Others called them miracles. but not everyone was convinced. "I feel like I'm part alien," one of the test subjects muttered, flexing a metallic limb that didn't belong to them. "And not the good kind." "No kidding," another chimed in, pulling down his glowing visor. "I look like I walked straight out of a bad anime." There were successes, sure. People with enhanced senses, speed, and durability. They became humanity's new warriors, trained to face the Korax. They weren't just fighting with ships anymore. They were fighting with their very biology. The Korax hadn't seen anything like it. But then there were the failures. The ones whose bodies didn't quite accept the alien modifications. They didn't become stronger. They became twisted, deformed, half human, half Korax in ways that defied logic. They were no longer people. They were something else entirely. Creatures of nightmares, blending into shadows and hunting the remnants of humanity. Some called them the Fallen Ones, the failed experiment that humanity tried to control but could never truly understand. They became another threat, another reason to fear. Not just the Korax, but us. Despite all the horror, despite the mistakes and losses, Project Rebirth wasn't a failure. Humanity had adapted, changed, evolved. And in doing so, they learned the hard truth. Survival wasn't about being stronger than the enemy. It was about being desperate enough to become something else entirely. Because when you're backed into a corner, you don't always recognize the monster you become. But sometimes, monsters are the only things that survive. The final confrontation wasn't some grand, coordinated effort. It wasn't the glorious battle humanity had envisioned in its countless war simulations. No, it was messy, chaotic, and drenched in desperation. The evolved soldiers, those enhanced by Project Rebirth, weren't polished warriors. They were raw, half-human experiments driven by instinct more than training. But they were all we had left. The Korax, ever the silent juggernauts, continued their advance with their eerie precision. Their fleets hovered like dark clouds over the earth, blotting out the sun. They didn't rush. They didn't scramble. They moved as if victory was inevitable. And for all we knew, maybe it was. But humanity has always been stubborn. We don't know how to quit, even when quitting would probably be the logical choice. Instead, we threw everything we had at them: ships, weapons, and most importantly, the enhanced soldiers. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove that the human spirit was worth something, even if that spirit was now encased in alien-modified flesh. The battle began in Earth's orbit. Thousands of enhanced soldiers launched into space, their modified bodies able to withstand the harsh vacuum. They tore through the Korax ships with a ferocity that shocked even our own strategists. For the first time, the Korax faltered. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't planned for creatures that fought like demons, creatures that weren't bound by the same rules as before. It wasn't just about the enhancements, though. It was about the creativity. One soldier, glowing like a human torch, discovered they could superheat the Korax ship hulls until they crumbled like tin foil. Another, who seemed to defy gravity itself, used their speed to dart through enemy formations, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. And then there was Unit Zero, the first successful hybrid. They didn't just fight, they obliterated. Faster than the eye could track, stronger than the Korax themselves, they became the symbol of humanity's defiance. If the Korax were gods, Unit Zero was our fallen angel, dragging them back down to Earth. But the Korax weren't done. They began deploying their planet-killer weapons, massive constructs designed to wipe out entire worlds in a single shot. The enhanced soldiers, undeterred, charged headfirst into the chaos. They weren't fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to ensure there was still a planet left to call home. In the end, it wasn't strategy or advanced technology that turned the tide. It was sheer, unrelenting determination. The final blow came when Unit Zero, wounded but unyielding, boarded the Corax's flagship and unleashed an energy blast so powerful it shattered their core systems. The ship exploded in a blinding flash, taking Unit Zero with it. The remaining Corax, without their leaders, faltered. For the first time, they retreated. The great silent force that had crushed humanity was now scattering like ash in the wind. We had won, or at least, we had survived. But the cost was staggering. The Earth was scarred, its people fractured, its future uncertain. The enhanced soldiers were hailed as heroes, but many wondered if they were still human at all. One thing was certain. The Corax had underestimated us. 12 humans had died, but in return, we had killed millions of them. And as the remnants of their fleet vanished into the void, one thought lingered in every mind. If they ever came back, they'd find a species that had learned the hard way what it took to survive. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Horizons Stories for more thrilling tales of science fiction and adventure.